Welcome to Bamfordrose and another question of the week. This week it's about servicing your ZF auto gearbox on your DB9, DBS, Rapide, Virage, and this will be the 6-speed auto, but will apply equally to the 8-speed auto, but arguably the 8-speed cars are not reaching the service interval for transmission oil fluid as of yet. Before we talk about that, you join us in a DBS Ultimate Edition. Engine performance, braking, handling on the Ultimate is exactly the same as any other DBS. On the Ultimate you get some very nice interior stitching, seats, rear seats, roof, and some nice carbon additions, door handles, and that all adds up to a very, very special place to sit inside. The Ultimate Edition does come at a premium over a standard DBS, and there's no doubt that all of these additions make a very special car extra special. You just have to work out for yourself if that indulgence is worth the extra spend. So for any car fitted with the ZF 6-speed auto transmission, here's a picture of it now, and this is without the differential unit attached to the rear. And now here's a picture of the differential unit attached to the rear. Anyone who has studied the prescribed service schedules from Aston will notice that at year 3, 6 and 9 there's a recommendation to change the differential oil. But apparently Aston state that the actual auto trans fluid is fill for life, or it's certainly not specified down in that 10-year prescribed service schedule. The ZF box is used in many other cars, and on many other cars there is actually a service interval, and that tends to be at either 8 years maximum or 60k maximum. It's becoming a question now because there are quite a few cars, especially older DB9, that do exhibit a few poor gear selection and drivability problems arising from old transmission fluid. And when it's suggested that the transmission fluid is renewed, then a savvy and well-researched owner will often say, but Aston said that the gearbox was filled for life. So let's just interrogate what filled for life means. Filled for life means that it's a sealed, filled for life unit for the life of that car. Now, the automaker will consider life of the car to be something like 100k, whereas a normal person would figure that filled for life is exactly what it says on the tin, but it's not. Inside the factory, delve deeper into that for life comment, and it's actually going to be some sort of sign-off criteria where 95% of units during testing made it on the original fill to 100,000 miles because they allowed an acceptable failure rate. So you changed the oil in your auto transmission because you wanted to keep it in good service, and beyond 100k you want that transmission to go on and on and on, rather than keep with the existing fill of oil and hoped that your transmission was one of those 95% that did make it the 100k lifetime limit. Let's remember that car companies make the bulk of their money in after sales. So if the transmission was going to fail after 10 years, 100,000 miles, this is well outside of a warranty period that they would be liable for. Not every maker is like this, but I'd argue they're more incentivized for the product not to be serviced adequately and then fail and the customer have to buy new parts, rather than the service schedule keep that component in tip-top fettle, meaning that it seldom failed. But regardless of that, then we certainly do not recommend that the ZF 6-speed is a fill and forget sealed unit, and do recommend a service interval of something sensible like 60k or 8 years. So when it comes to servicing, the differential bolted onto the back of the gearbox needs a Castrol BOT 270A. Now that can only be bought from an Aston dealer because although it's a 75W90 grade Castrol oil, which can be bought from at any motor factor, the A part of the Castrol BOT270A refers to an Aston specific blend. It's approximately £20 per litre, and then there's a friction modification agent, it's called Kendall, and that bottle is approximately £25. So that services the rear differential, which is every 3, 6 or 9 year, every 30k, 60k, 90k. And then that just leaves the transmission to service. A wet change is going to be about 7-8 litres in the transmission and about 2 litres in the cooling circuit. The transmission at the rear has some pipes that run to the front of the car where there's a radiator, and it's that cooling circuit that holds about 2 litres. The factory do have their own oil, a Shell grade oil, which is M1375.4, which they try and sell you for something like £40 a litre. It's a ZF box, and ZF have their own Lifeguard 6 transmission oil, which retails for about £17 per litre. I know which one I'd be buying. The service kit for the transmission is an oil pan, gasket, filters, fixing, and the oil. And for those of you listening who are good with the spanners, then it is a relatively easy at-home service routine. The only tricky part about it would be if the cooler and the whole circuit has been drained and you need to run the transmission up to temperature, get the oil up to temperature, to get the thermostat open, to get oil circulating entirely around the system, and then top up accordingly. It's really difficult to get the oil up to temperature to get that thermostat to open. But for what I guess 9 out of 10 people watching this video, then this is going to be a service that a workshop performs. So you don't need to worry about how tricky it is to get that thermostat and the cooling system bled. So there's a few telltale signs that you could probably recognise yourself as the driver to assess whether you needed to service the transmission fluid on your ZF 6-speed auto. We're in park at the moment, and one telltale symptom would not be if it clunked into gear from going from park to drive. Some cars clunk into gear more than others, and this is just a function of the car coming out of park and then going loaded into drive. So if you were sat in your DB9 thinking that it was quite clunky when you went from park to drive, then from park press neutral, and then from neutral press drive, and you'll feel no clunk at all, proving that that is just a function of the gearbox coming out of its parking lock. So while stationary going from park to drive, snatchy, hard take up of that drive isn't a symptom necessarily that you need an oil change. Hard shifts when on the go would be. So we're just letting this gearbox shift in auto mode, and these shifts, as you'd expect, this car's only got 13,000 miles on the clock, are absolutely silky smooth. So hard jerky shifts when on the go will be one symptom. Another would be delayed shifts, putting your foot down, engine revs rising, there being no drive, there being a delay, and then there being a jerky uptake of drive. So those sort of subtle cues that shifting is not as smooth as it once was, early indications that perhaps you need a transmission fluid service. When the system is degraded quite badly, to the point that maybe you're on a cruise, when you're running at say 60, 70 mile an hour, and you can notice an engine speed oscillation when the road speed is fixed. Another symptom would be the shifts are slipping, a prolonged time to go from one ratio to the next. However, if you set an interval of something like 60,000 miles or every 8 years, then I don't think you'll encounter the symptoms which give the driver the cue, the prompt, that a service of the transmission fluid is needed. So it's certainly a good idea for anyone that owns a car older than 2012 that uses the 6-speed auto gearbox to consider an oil service at your next service. Compared to DB9, Virage, Rapide, the DBS has quite different shift maps and shifting speed. On a 450 bhp DB9 this is not possible, but the 470 bhp engines onwards, it's possible to remap the transmission control unit of those cars with a DBS calibration so that all cars can enjoy DBS shifting quality. If those cars were remapped with DBS shifting and the transmission fluid was changed, you'll really be driving away in a different car. It will feel new because it will be driving a lot smoother and the shifting will be as sporty as DBS. There's certainly no need to panic over whether your gearbox oil has been serviced or not, because this ZF gearbox is an extremely tough unit. It's just worth checking at next service, especially if you're over that mileage or age threshold. Just check whether your transmission oil has ever been changed before, and it'd certainly be worth considering doing. The gearbox fitted to these cars is the ZF 6HP with the suffix 26, which is supposed to denote that the gearbox has a maximum torque limit of 600 Newton meters. DB9 was 570, and in the 470 bhp upgrade motors, then some of those engines just hit 600 Newton meters. But I've got experience of this gearbox running for prolonged times at 650 Newton meters, and I've never encountered failure at all. It really is a hardy unit with a lot more weight, with a lot more luggage and occupant weight, arguably doing longer tours, then you'd certainly be wanting to consider a gearbox service change. I hope you liked that discussion of the ZF automatic gearbox in the Aston Martin DBS Ultimate Edition. As always, it really helps us if you can like, comment,